This was a fun project with the kids, a $150 tie rail go-kart we found on Craigslist. We turned it into a little mini buggy for the sand. So the first order of business was to get a motor plate on here for the big block motor that we planned on using. We used a little angle iron, strengthened that up, and then put our plate on there with the adjustable slots. Got everything painted up for our motor. Next, we needed to make a battery box. We used some angle iron to create a simple battery box. We needed the battery to power an LED whip that we planned on putting on the tie rail go-kart, and we had some overhead lights on top of the roll cage that worked, so we wanted to use those, and we also installed some brake lights for the cart. We have everything painted and ready to install. The engine is a 18 horsepower Duramax 420cc with electric start. Here we have it kind of mocked up and test fit to make sure all of our clearances are good. We're also using a torque converter, as you can see there. We took off the crusty old single piston caliper and we installed a dual piston caliper. This is just for a small motorcycle. It worked real well on the go-kart. Made our own bracket and welded that up. We had the kids involved with the project because we wanted them to learn about the go-kart, and if they want to drive it, they have to work on it, and therefore if something goes wrong while we're out in the dunes, they should know a little bit about the mechanics of the go-kart, and together they should be able to discuss the problem and kind of work their way toward the area of the cart that may need attention. So with all the switches for the lights and the ignition switch, and we also bought a tack for it, we wanted to make this little switch box for it. So like most people, we started with a cardboard template, and we got our shape and our dimensions so that everything would fit that we wanted to be in the box. And then we took this cardboard template and we transferred it to sheet metal and started cutting it out and drilling the holes for all the switches and the wires. We made a back plate for it to close off the back of it, and we made our bends in there. We were pretty happy with the way that the box turned out. Just a real simple design, but should work for the purpose we need it for. The cart's pretty crusty, so we can't have anything too nice on there. There's the box all set up with all the switches and the tack and everything, and then mounted on the cart. Next was a fuse box. And again, we used sheet metal to make a little mounting plate and then welded that onto the frame. Here are the original seats from the tie rail. We reinforced the bottom of them with some fiberglass, and we added some pads and these 3-point seat belts. And then for the sand tires, we had to put those adapters for the rear ATV wheels. We made our own adapters for the front ATV wheels, and it gave the cart a really aggressive look. We really liked that. Our first trip to the dunes, this is Pismo. And so with the first drive, you can see the cart's pretty slow. I'm pretty sure my daughter has it full throttle here, but the governor's still in the engine, and therefore it only turns 3,600 RPM. I'm sure the torque converter helps a little bit. You can see it gets through the sand fine. It doesn't struggle with the sand, but it's pretty slow, kind of boring. The kids are having fun though, and that's what counts. You could see the cart had a pretty good night presence with the LED whip, the overhead lights, and we had tail lights as well with a brake pressure switch for brake lights. Now our gear ratio was clearly off. You can tell by the smoking clutch. We had an 8-tooth output on the torque converter and a 70-tooth on the rear axle. So we wanted to change that up for the next trip. So here's a little bracket we made for the throttle so we could bypass the governor. That would allow us to spin more than 3,600 RPM with this stock Duramax engine. And then the next change was that big old shaft there. We cut that off obviously, but this change that we're making here is a jack shaft that we wanted to add for more gear reduction. So it was kind of a funky little design that we came up due to space constraints that we had back there, but we moved the output sprocket from the torque converter over to the inside, like underneath the cylinder of the engine, and then that allowed us to go from that sprocket from the torque converter to a jackshaft sprocket, which was 16 tooth, and then the other jackshaft sprocket was an 8 tooth, and that went down to our 70 tooth rear sprocket on the axle. The little skateboard wheel idler pulley, that was due to a chain clearance issue that we had, and we knew when we made it was a little janky and temporary, but we had a trip coming up and we didn't have a lot of time, so we just wanted to get this thing going and keep our fingers crossed that it would work well. And it worked for a day and a half, and that little pulley with the skateboard wheel, it did break. So here's our second trip to Pismo with the cart after the two modifications, the governor being bypassed here and the gear reduction. And right away you can see the cart is running much quicker on the sand. I mean, this thing's moving pretty good. I was a lot happier with the way the cart was running. Looked like it was a lot more fun. My daughter, for some reason, likes to make left turns. I don't know if she has an interest in NASCAR, but it seems like she's always making left turns. But you can see here in this clip that the back tire is throwing a little more roost, because there's more power getting down to the sand, and she has to counter steer a little bit. So it's very clear that the cart's making more power, putting down more power. So overall, this was a really fun project with the kids. We took an old clapped out off-road go-kart and turned it into a mini buggy for the kids. Had a great time out in the sand with this thing.